Welcome to Change It Up Radio here with Paula Shaw. So glad to have you with me today. I have a guest who is truly one of my favorite people on the planet. And in just a little bit, I'll be introducing you to her. Her name is Melinda Wittstock, and she is a powerhouse. And right now, she is the creator of what I think is the coolest podcast platform that exists. We'll be talking a lot about that. We'll be talking about women in business. We'll be talking about many things that I think you'll find of interest. So please stay with us. Right now, I want to just once again welcome you. I am your host, Paula Shaw. I am an author. I am the author of Chakras, the Magnificent Seven, which I don't have a copy of with me today. I gave my last one away. I am the author of this book, Grief. When Will This Pain Ever End? And my most recent book is truly one of my favorites. It's just a little book that's kind of one of those little books everybody needs. It's called Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say. And one of the things I really love about that book is that it's very simple, very brief, but it gives you the reasons why sometimes we don't have good success with those tough talks, with those conversations where somebody's emotional, where somebody has suffered some kind of a loss or is in some kind of emotional pain. We're not as good at those conversations, certainly, as we are at talking about the latest fashion trend or the game last night or so many other things that come to us more easily. Intellectual conversations we're very good at because in our culture, we're taught to be in our heads, right? If it doesn't make good sense, if it isn't intelligent, then it's not really worth talking about. And yet, we are feeling beings. We are emotional beings. And sometimes our feelings don't make good sense. They're just what we feel. And when people are feeling something, it's important to know how to talk to them on that level. And the level that they are on is not intellect, it's the heart. It's what's going on with their feelings. And later on in the show, my daughter Erin will be joining us, and we're going to be talking about some of the emotion that's going on in our country today and what is happening when people are in the heart and not in the head, because sometimes logic has nothing to do with feeling. So I would love to encourage you to either go to Amazon and get a hold of that book. Or if you'd like an immediate cheat sheet that will help you with those difficult conversations, you can go to paulashaw.com, and there you'll see information about my practice as a life transition expert and coach. You will also see information about me as a speaker and as the host of this show. And I have a free gift for you there, which is called 20 Things to Say and Not to Say to People in Pain. And it's just a cheat sheet of sentence after sentence after sentence that's helpful and the ones that you want to avoid so that the conversation can have the end that you want, so that it can be a helpful conversation. That's paulashaw.com. Also, if you would like to get more information about this show, or if you want to hear past shows, because we have had some amazing people on this show, you can get that on changeitupradio.com. That's changeitupradio.com. As most of you know, we air on AM 1170 here in San Diego and 96.1 FM. but we're also on every major podcast platform, including my favorite that we will be talking about today, Podopolo. It's the latest and the greatest. So stay with us because shortly we will be bringing on the creator of that platform. So I'm wanting to talk a little bit first about women in business, women in life, and what's happened, what's changed. I'm calling this show A Woman on a Mission because that's what I think Melinda Wittstock is. And last week, you remember, we interviewed Dr. Eliza Cicerone, who is a naturopathic oncologist. And she was on a mission to change the way medicine works, to make it more holistic and more personal. And I love her mission. And that's one of the reasons why we talked with her. And today, Melinda Wittstock, who will be joining us, is on a mission to change the world of podcasting in a new and different way. And I can't wait for her to share that with you. But she has been on a mission for probably her whole life. I don't know about her childhood, but I certainly know as an adult, she's been doing some amazing things. And I was thinking about this whole situation of women in my lifetime. And it was this year that I came into a new decade on my birthday last September when I turned 70. And not that I in any way feel old or feel like I'm any less capable than I ever was, but I am reflecting a bit more about what I've experienced in my life. And, it occurred to me that when I was young, when I was in high school and then going into college, there were very few careers open for women. You were either going to be a nurse, a teacher, a secretary, or a home economist. I don't even really know anymore what a home economist did, but I know that was one of the things that we were going to be allowed to do. I can't think of one person in my high school graduating class that I know of that had the goal to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or any of those kinds of professions. It just wasn't happening. It just wasn't in the cards for women back then. That was the 60s. But then along came Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of my favorite heroes of all time, who broke into law at Harvard. And then there was Gloria Steinem, who did so much for women's liberation. Rosa Parks, Barbara Jordan, and Coretta Scott King, who really led the trail, led the path of civil rights, and Bella Abzug, who was also very big in women's rights. These names come to me because when I was young, these were the women who were speaking out and who were creating change. Even though at that time the old saying was that women were supposed to be home barefoot in the kitchen. And and I remember my mother, well, she was a nurse, so she actually did go to work. But a great deal of the time she was home because remember Ozzie and Harriet? Well, a lot of you probably don't. But there were shows like Ozzie and Harriet where mom was the one home in an apron and she was in charge of the children and the cooking. There was not a career in the forecast for her. But all that has changed hugely these days. And and thank God. In my 20s, when I divorced my husband, I couldn't get a credit card in my own name. No, you could not get a credit card. You were sort of nothing without a man. Today, Women are having children on their own. They're buying homes. They're able to choose any career out there that lights them up, that makes them excited. And so I say, hallelujah. It's good to be alive now. And those of you who are young, boy, there were some of us that had to blaze a little bit of a trail so that you would have the choice that you have now. And I'm so glad that times have changed the way they have. So in just a minute, I want to introduce you to somebody. I'll tell you a little bit about her actual bio, but Melinda and I met about 3 years ago at one of the first podcast summits that certainly I think it was the very first that Steve Olsher had put on. And she and I were there as media icons. That's what they called us. And I think it was kind of one of those love at first sight type of things. We just liked each other from the first conversation. And I had no idea who she was. I had no idea what a powerhouse she was. We were just two souls that came together and felt an immediate connection. And we have remained friends and kind of walked with each other along the path of what has come into both of our lives ever since then. But let me tell you formally a little bit about Melinda Wittstock. She is a 5-time serial entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of Podopolo, which we're going to be talking about here. And Podopolo is the world's first socially interactive and gamified podcast app and network where people gather to discover their favorite podcasts, connect with hosts and each other, and win rewards as they put lessons learned into action to enhance their lives and engage in an ongoing world changing social impact. I love that. She built 4 other businesses to huge 7 and 8 figure success. She has a very popular podcast of her own called Wings of Inspired Business, which was chosen by Entrepreneur Magazine as the number 8 podcast out of zillions for 2020 in the world of business. And as if all that wasn't enough, she's a former award winning journalist and TV anchor. And if I tell you any more about her, we won't have time to actually get to interview her. So, Melinda, please come on, join me and speak for yourself.
Hey, Paula, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. And it was true. It was like when we met, I felt like I'd known you forever.
I know. I
You
think
know
we
how
were.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes it's just like that with people.
Mhm. It is. And I think
Yeah.
when spirituality is an important part of your life, and I know it is for you, and that we share in common yoga and meditation and a reverence for gratitude. I think you tend to find like tribe members. I used to love to say to people like you when I met them, I think the mothership is very happy that we found each other.
Absolutely though, but it's such a great point because you do attract into your life at all times kind of what you're kind of giving out and what you're thinking about, like our internal state of being is kind of manifesting what's around us. And so I've found the more I've been on this conscious journey, the more amazing people, show up in my
Oh,
life, like amazing podcasters such as you, Paula, and amazing women, trailblazers, just people who are just doing really special things in the world. And some of them are on my team at Podopolo, so I'm very
oh,
grateful for
so
that.
good. And I want to talk to you so much more about that, but we've got to take a quick break. I apologize for bringing you in and then going to a break, but I just couldn't wait to bring you on. So let's just pause for a moment. We will go to a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And my guest today the woman on a mission, an incredible powerhouse, Melinda Wittstock. She is the CEO and founder of Podopolo. She's a former journalist and news anchor and the host of an incredible podcast, which I have gotten to be on, and I'm going to talk her into having me on there again. Wings of Inspired Business. So welcome back, Melinda.
Hey, it's so great to be with you, Paula.
Oh, I know. I know. It always just feels like, we're two souls that just gather together and there's a comfort zone. No matter when. I think remember in the beginning when we used to have our little Saturday morning chats?
Oh, I love those.
We do too. We just got to talk about our kids and what's the good laundry soap, the kind of things women talk about, when you're not creating new businesses and all of that. So, Melinda, speaking of creating new businesses and all of that, you've got so many cool things going on right now, and I don't know where to go first, but maybe let's just go back for a minute. You were, for many years, a journalist and a TV anchor, and news was your deal. Do you feel that that beginning had impact on you now being a podcaster and then creating this amazing platform for podcasters?
Oh my goodness, there's no doubt. When you get old enough, and by the way, I can't believe that you're 70 years old, Paula. You don't know, you do not look your age. I almost fell out of my seat when you said that. So,
Oh, thank you,
but
dear. I
but
think I keep saying it because I don't believe it. It's like pinching myself, but that's okay. Go ahead, darling.
but when you get older, I think Steve Jobs said this really well. He said it's really easy to connect the dots looking backwards. So of course those things did. I mean, I wound up on the Times of London as a 22-year-old. And back in the day, I heard you talking earlier about the role of women, and journalism became something in the 80s, that kind of, 70s, but more into the 80s, that was sort of something that women could go do. And but I was a trailblazer. I was a financial reporter and correspondent. And then I started writing about the media. And I got to interview Steve Jobs and Ted Turner and all these people. And I
Oh,
was kind of
how cool.
and I was the kind of journalist that I always wanted to know kind of where the story was going next, and also to learn from the people that I was interviewing. And I remember standing there one day and I was writing a lot about this new thing called the internet. And Rupert Murdoch was standing behind me, because being the media correspondent on a Rupert Murdoch newspaper, let me just say, is not an easy job. And he was kind of, sometimes he'd stand behind you as you were writing. I was like, kind of terrifying. And but he said, I really think you should stop all this writing about this internet thing. It's not going to really amount to much. Yeah, that was hilarious. So anyway, I can trace a lot of it back. So I mean, I was an award-winning media correspondent of the Times at the time when the internet was coming up. There's this new thing called cable television. I mean, all these sorts of things, right, were happening in the media space. And I learned a tremendous amount as a specialist correspondent on my beat, if you will.
Yeah.
But broke a lot of stories and got interviewed on television. I became something of a pundit. And I was, I don't know, someone just thought I'd be good as a news anchor. And I got hired by the Financial Times to create their television shows in Europe and Asia. So I created those, co-produced them, and hosted them, and went on to the BBC and much more besides. Now, as all this is going on, I've always been an entrepreneur. When I was like a 6-year-old girl, I went door to door demanding prepayment from neighbors for my show. Okay. So my show. So I don't know what gave me the confidence to think, oh, of course, people are going to pay me. And
your parents, God bless them.
Right. So my parents, I thought, was kind of like hilarious, because I came home and I said, where can I find 100 chairs? And I had like this fistful of dollars. And my dad was like, what? I think my black lab was the secret, because he was my enforcer. You know what I mean? He wouldn't let
Oh, I love that.
me. me the money. But anyway, so I've always had that impetus, and
Mhm.
I found myself wanting to create and kind of, I guess I call it disrupt from within. And I created all sorts of new things within the auspices of major media companies. And it
Oh,
got frustrating after a little bit because I couldn't do all the things that I wanted to do.
yes.
So at the BBC, creating a show for the BBC and growing that to a 20 million audience, amazing. But I felt like sometimes we were doing it despite, not because,
Yeah.
and that entrepreneurial bug sort of really bit. And my first business was in media. The next one really brought in a lot of technology into it. I got really interested in crowdsourcing and algorithms and data
Oh, my
analytics. And I mean,
goodness.
and so all the businesses have been, whether in traditional media, social media, data analytics, just really interesting business modeling, mobile platforms. So when I look at Podopolo now and what Podopolo is, it's exactly the sort of sum of my parts, I guess, in my life. Like, I don't know anyone else, honestly, who could have come up with this idea, because it is so much, every single aspect of it has been proven in some way or another in each one of my previous businesses and on my life journey.
And maybe we should tell people because I don't think everybody knows what Podopolo is. And
Oh,
first of
right.
all, I just
We're just
love
talking
the
about it.
name.
Yeah. So, really, Podopolo is a completely game changing platform, a mobile app that makes podcasting social, where people can find great podcasts around their friend relationships, find great friends, both new and old, around podcasts, unlock a library of 2.5 million podcasts, more than
Oh,
100 million episodes, and go on a personalized listening journey to really build their library based on, their interests, their
mhm.
friend relationships, and much more besides. Um, the reason for the social aspect of it is manifold, because I think as a podcaster, I've always yearned to know, God, is somebody listening? Like, who's out there? Hello? What do people think? And really, I've always thought that the best content is conversation and community. So wouldn't it be wonderful to create a really truly interactive experience where people were able to take the conversation further from the podcast, and have like an evolving discussion where podcasters would be able to really engage their listeners as they were listening, not have to go on to myriad other platforms and have that disconnect.
Mhm.
And it also, we really also believe that when people are engaging in a meaningful way from the listener perspective, I think it's a frustrating experience for a lot of listeners. There are millions of podcasts out there, but they struggle to discover the ones that are around their interests. They see the same ones show up at the top of the algorithms on every other
Right,
platform. Like, it
right.
looks like there's only 10 podcasts in the world, but there are
Yeah.
actually 2.5 million, and a lot of them wonderful gems, right? So it's frustrating for the listener. It's also frustrating to not know who else is listening. Like, have you ever listened to a podcast, Paula, where you hear something like it's a soundbite, or it's like just an aha that you've got from it, and you want to share it with a person? You want to take it immediately and have a conversation about it, or who else is listening to this, or you want to figure out how to put it into action in your daily life to enhance your life, or perhaps to have a big worldwide impact with a game-changing idea, whatever it is, right?
Right.
There's no place to do that. And so we set out to improve the listener experience and improve the podcaster's experience, and namely, enable the podcaster to be more easily discovered by people who are already interested in what they were talking about, their
Yes.
mission, their topic, um, to help the podcaster really engage audiences in real time. And by doing so, also getting to know them so they could be more responsive in their content. And here's the big headline: actually make money from podcasting, right?
Yay.
Actually make money. You know
Yeah.
that 85% of podcasters don't make money from podcasting?
I'm totally not surprised by that at all.
It's crazy. And I mean, one of the things that I learned, not only as a podcaster, but just through all my background in media, is that it's really a structural problem.
Have-
That you can be really good at marketing, you can be really good business expert, you can do all of those things, but if you don't have access to your listener data, you don't know anything about who's actually listening,
so true.
and you're a podcaster like most with relatively small numbers because it's a niche media, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So very no, hardly anyone's going to be Joe Rogan because they're not meant to be. They have a niche, highly engaged audience, but because it's not big numbers, advertisers shy away from it because they're also blind to the data. They also don't know who's interested in listening. So if you can take the guesswork out of that and allow the podcaster a way to really know who's listening, how long they're listening, what their interests are, how influential, how they're interacting with the content, you're able then to match them with advertisers who, on the flip side of it, know with some certainty, at least not guesswork, how many of those people are actually qualified for their offer. And so our whole mission is about enlightening and empowering people, one podcast at a time, but also putting profit and power into the hands of the independent content creator so they can actually really be paid what they should be for their efforts.
That is such a beautiful mission that you're on. As a podcaster, I know all those difficulties that you were just describing.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we have to take a quick break here, but then let's just come right back and talk about that because, you're providing a solution to a huge dilemma, I think, for nearly every podcaster out there. So we will be right back. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw and my guest today, Melinda Wittstock, creator and founder of Podopolo and her own podcast, Wings of Inspired Business. So if you've missed what we've just been talking about, you want to listen to the part of the show you have not heard because Melinda is talking about this amazing platform she's created called Podopolo and and what a wonderful thing it does for podcasters. And I will say, Melinda, as a podcaster myself, and having talked with many others, and since I have been in the beta group of the creation of your podcast platform, and I listen to a lot of podcasters on Clubhouse and other formats, you know, it's hard work to create a podcast.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you need to do. And if you want to create a quality podcast, then you need to do a little homework and you want to get interesting guests and you want to bring information to people. And then on top of that, if it's up to you to try to get sponsors or figure out how to get any financial support to help you with the expenses of your podcast, it's well, we know it becomes too much for many people. The statistics are most podcasts don't get more than 6 shows and then they're done. And so here you are with this format that's actually helping we podcasters not only get listeners but to get sponsorship. And that is a concept I think is original with you, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I guess there are different pieces of it in my background. I remember thinking back to Capital News Connection, which is basically a news agency I created just after 9/11 that really changed the game for political news reporting, where we were localizing content for 300 public radio stations, a whole bunch of major market TV stations, increasingly newspapers and digital properties and whatnot. And it was interesting. We had a little segment on the Washington D.C. A public radio station
Uh-huh.
called Powered Breakfast. It was like a 1 minute thing, looking forward to what was going to happen in the corridors of power in Washington. And because it was public radio, we could not have a call to action in the ad or a comparative statement,
Oh, mhm.
right? Because it was public radio.
Right.
And so why was it that I was able to sell a quarter, so 3 months worth of a 10-second credit with no call to action, no comparative statement for $250,000?
I'd like to know the answer to that.
Okay. So the reason I was able to do that is I could prove exactly who was listening. It wasn't just the number of people who were listening. It was like, who were they?
Yeah.
How influential did the advertiser really want to reach those people? Because at the end of the day, the advertiser is buying access to specific people and communities of people, and hopefully engaged people or people who are pre-qualified for their offers. So the problem in podcasting, where I was saying that it was a structural issue, the only data that podcasters have had historically are download data.
Hmm.
It doesn't tell you anything. It
Right.
doesn't even tell you how many people are actually listening, because a lot of people, an increasing number of people, are streaming. And
Mhm.
just because they downloaded it or subscribed doesn't mean they listened. And you really don't know, and you don't know who they are. You don't know what interests them about your podcast. You don't know, maybe a lot of them listen for 1 minute and stop, or 14 minutes and stop. But like, none of that data. You don't know where they are. You don't know what interests them. You don't know how influential they are.
Mhm.
Now, by architecting the Podopolo platform in this way, as podcasters are interacting and growing their communities, we know a lot about what people are interested in listening to. So, how this manifests is we can match, Paula, exactly the right type of audience that you're seeking, or that we know from their listening histories would be interested in interacting with you and listening to your podcast. So it's part recommendation engine, part cross promotion engine,
Mhm.
at the back end here, that really leverages our understanding of how people are listening, what they're wanting from the platform. Now, before everyone spooks out about data, we do not track data. We do not sell data to anyone. The only one that we share this information with are the podcasters themselves. And in aggregate, when advertisers say, hey, I'd really like to reach people who are, I don't know, new mothers in their in their 30s who do yoga, and we
Yeah.
can say, yeah, these 37 podcasts. But apart from that, we take privacy very seriously, and we're very, oh my God, my goodness, really determined also to really fix what we perceive as wrong with social networking, where people fall into like their different information bubbles of like Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3 with
Yeah.
alternative facts. we're, we're, we're concerned about that because we have a lot of the same kind of underlying technology,
Mhm.
um, that we're using it in a way that leads people to enjoy and be rewarded for discovery and new things, and actually elevates the conversation.
So if I come on to Podopolo as a listener,
Mhm.
how is my experience different than iTunes or?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so the new app. So let's, like, if anyone don't download what's in the app store right now. How often does the founder say, "Oh, don't," it's about to come down and be replaced with this brand new app. Okay, so it's very personalized. So the first thing will happen is you will get an invite from a friend, of yours, because we are invite only to begin with.
Mhm.
Um, and you will come into the experience, and you will basically share what interests you. Yeah, like, I'm interested in tech podcasts, or I'm interested because we help you, kind of almost like a concierge in a really fine hotel.
Yeah.
We help you customize your listening experience by
Wow.
really asking you only about what are you interested in. And then
Mhm.
we make suggestions for you to start building your personalized library. At that point, you can import your listening library in from other apps, or you can browse what's hot, what's new, what's trending with your friends, and all manner of different ways of finding interesting podcasts for you and building your library. library. Meantime, you can also search by topic, by podcast name, and also get this, by guest. So say, for instance, I wanted to see every podcast that you'd ever been interviewed on, Paula. I could create that and create a listener playlist of all the podcasts you've ever been on. And this helps listeners discover, who are already interested in you, discover other great podcasts that are associated with you. And that's just one example of the way we do the cross promotion and the discovery. So that's part of the experience. But meanwhile, you're making friends around the podcasts that you're interested in. We're a bit of a matchmaker. It's a little bit dating app in a weird way, right? Because
I'll have an awareness of other people that are listening.
Yeah, who are listening, because it's totally interactive. So at a really top level, to help people understand this, if you took Spotify and you kind of mashed it up with Instagram and maybe a little bit of Reddit thrown in, that's getting close. It's just that we also really reward positive contribution, give listeners the opportunity to interact with hosts such as yourself, give you the opportunity to leverage audio commenting, to put people on the air on your podcast, asking questions of a guest coming up, or so many really cool things like that. The ability to really share the content, share discussions of the content, take it from on app to on air to back on app again. And each time with listeners being really rewarded for contributing, making a contribution, having great conversations and enjoying great podcasts.
And I know you're working with a team of geniuses.
They are. Yeah.
All of this that you've just described, you're still doing your own podcast, Inspired Business. So I don't want to let this interview end without you saying a little bit about what Wings of Inspired Business is all about.
Well, I think like most of us, we create the podcast we wish we'd had, right? And so as a female founder in that, technology space, easier said than done, right? Women with highly scalable companies that are qualified for venture capital backing still only get 2% of the money. Even after 20 years, that number has not moved. And it's crazy because there's so many women who have IPO'd, and there's all these stats about better, more efficient use of capital, better returns, and just this fact: companies that are founded by women tend to survive at much higher rates than the ones created by men. They actually survive. And yet so it was kind of part of that frustration, and also feeling like for much of my career I'd been the only woman in the room, and I fantasized about, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if women really showed up for each other, and rather than you go girl, just the pleasantry of that, but actually put it into action. Like, we bought each other's products, we invested in each other, we mentored each other, we promoted each other, we lifted each other. Wouldn't that be amazing to create that kind of ecosystem? So it was within that in my mind, and I really wanted to highlight, affirm, and acclaim the journeys of entrepreneurial women. And so one day I just started, and I think somebody had said to me, you're an ex-radio and TV host, how is it that you don't have a podcast? That's ridiculous. And so typical me, I launched within 6 weeks of that comment from this person. And then I'm almost 600 episodes in now. So
that is so great. And so many good episodes, really, and episodes that teach other women some really important things about businesses. I think your guests and you really do serve that purpose of lifting.
Yeah, it's personal growth and business growth, and it's very conscious. Much in the way that Podopolo and the underlying is a consciousness company as much as it is a media company.
And that all comes from the creator and the leader. And I think that's the statement we're going to have to end on. This flew by way too fast, but they're conscious because you're conscious. And that's part of what I love about you, and part of the gift I think you bring to the world. And I am so grateful. We definitely have to do this again.
We do.
You were my first guest when I started Change It Up Radio. And I am going to just strictly podcasting in just one more show. So you are actually my last guest on Engine Up Radio on air on radio. But we will be connected because I'm a Podopolo fan, and that's where my
Well,
podcast
it's
is.
so wonderful to have you as part of Podopolo. Paula, wait till you see the graphics. I think you're positioned in like a graphic, like right next to Seth Godin or somebody,
Oh,
you know.
yes, thank you, love. Thank you for who you are, and thank you for gracing my show with your presence.
Lots of love to you, Paula. Thank you so much.
Bye bye. And stay with us, everybody, because my daughter Erin Shaw will be coming in just a moment, and we will be doing our last segment, which you know as Rutbusters. All right, we will be right back. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And in this segment, I will be joined by my daughter Erin Shaw. We, and as you know, Erin is a musician and she is a writer, and she is a woman who has a very, very big heart. She has a lot of passion, and she speaks her mind. And that's what we are going to do in this segment. We normally do our rut busters in this segment where Erin presents me with a challenge of some way to get out of the rut I'm stuck in. And we present that challenge to all of you as well.
Right.
But today, Erin has other things on her mind that I think are very important.
I do. Yeah, obviously there's been a lot in the news this week pertaining to police violence in America, which is something that a topic I'm passionate about discussing. I think as white people, sometimes we are uncomfortable discussing white privilege and or supremacy in this country. It's uncomfortable. I imagine you could ask a German person if they felt similarly discussing Nazism. And I think it's important that we get comfortable confronting our history. And in some cases in this country, our present. And that we talk about things that are uncomfortable so as to raise awareness and do our part to help. So obviously, over the last few days, the trial of Derek Chauvin, who is the police officer that murdered George Floyd, is happening in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And a few days ago in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, I believe, a young man by the name of Daunte Wright was accidentally, so we've been told, shot and killed by a police officer who resigned just this morning, who was a 26-year veteran of the force. And, I was just engaging in a conversation on Twitter with a man who was a British person of color, who seemed to be a conservative, who was trying to argue the side that if Daunte Wright had complied with police, he wouldn't have been shot. And you hear this a lot, not often from the Black community, I think probably more from the white community, but perhaps more from the conservative side of the spectrum, regardless of race. Right. You'll often hear pro-police rhetoric that if these Black men had complied with police, they wouldn't have been shot. And that really strikes a nerve with me. Obviously, I would never presume to be the voice of the Black experience in America. I am a white woman, and that is not my experience. I don't feel fear for my life if I'm pulled over by a cop. But what I don't stand for is victim blaming. And to me, it is akin to blaming the way a woman was dressed for why she was raped or sexually assaulted. Mm-hmm. I think saying if this young man had complied, he wouldn't have been shot, is conjecture. We don't know that for sure. There are plenty of cases of people who do comply with police and end up being killed. George Floyd was literally murdered while in police custody and handcuffed. So I don't really buy that argument myself. But I think that there's two things I wanted to talk about with you today, Mom. One is why we victim blame, and is it a comfort thing? Is it a place of mental protection where you just can't fathom that someone could do something awful, so you try to rationalize it and find a reason for it? And then the other thing I wanted your thoughts on is the mental health of police officers. And is this a conversation we need to be having as we discuss police reform in this country? What sort of mental health screenings and or consistent treatment should these people who are in a position of power carrying firearms be experiencing? So that's what we're here to talk about in this segment, because I didn't feel like we could let this go unchecked and just chat about lighthearted stuff today. Because for me, it's been very heavy on my heart all week. So
Yes,
yeah.
I know. And mine as well. Shocking, quite honestly. One would sort of delude oneself and think that while there's this trial going on that was about a murder committed by a policeman, everybody would be on their best behavior.
Yeah.
But instead, this crazy thing has happened. And so it was incredibly shocking. And, just to go to that point first, I think personally, not only should there be intense screening, there are many psychological kinds of screening, like the MMPI and other kinds of screening, where you can get a good understanding of what a person's psyche is
Yeah.
all the time. But not only that, I'm actually big on the idea that since police, in many ways, suffer trauma, sometimes daily,
Yeah.
there should be ongoing therapy for police because they are often victims of PTSD.
Yeah.
PTSD does not just go away by itself.
Yeah.
And who's to say that in 26 years of service, this woman officer hadn't experienced trauma over and over again so that she would make an error, to me, as unfathomable as thinking you're tasering somebody and actually shooting them.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Obviously, I'm not a mental health professional, but mental health is another topic I'm very passionate about, because I think the majority of the issues we experience in the world could be resolved if everybody had good, affordable access and lack of stigma when it comes to mental health care. Yeah, I don't, this is a systemic issue. This is not one time in a decade. This is all the time. And I just, I feel like if you see these, I know this week earlier was a video from December where I believe it was an Army lieutenant was pepper sprayed by an officer. There were two officers there after a traffic stop driving a new car home and the plates weren't on yet. I've driven my own new cars home. No one's ever pulled me over. But this was an Army, a soldier who was pepper sprayed by this cop that was just screaming at him to comply. And, this issue or this idea of complying, again, this is a psychological thing where I question if you are so triggered by someone not complying to your order that you cascade into a murderous rage. That is not someone that I think should be in a position of power, and there was, it's not even just amongst the Black community. There was a woman in the UK who was assaulted, I can't remember her name, who was assaulted and raped and murdered by a retired police officer. So it's like, I think we see it. And of course, yes, there are great police officers that do great work, and I certainly would never presume to, generalize and say all cops are bad. But I think that when you have a community of people that tend to skew toward this rage when they're not in control, that is to me such a red flag of someone who either has abuse in their history or lack of control in their head. I mean, all things that I'm imagining are easily treatable through good mental health care. Is that accurate to say?
Oh, absolutely. But I do think the history is really important, and that should be part of the screening
Yeah.
when they apply for the job. Because we all know people who were abused or damaged or grew up in really troubled homes, they may have issues. And to now put a gun,
Yeah.
a weapon that can cause death into the hands of that person. I mean, it's almost like our police should be the most highly screened people that get hired for anything. I heard last night on CNN somebody was saying there's certain jobs where you just can't screw up.
Yeah.
Being a
I received
pilot.
probably more training to teach children's music classes than a police officer would receive to join the force. That is insane to me.
That is insane. And there are just those jobs, like an airplane pilot, like a surgeon, where you expect somebody to, I mean, we know as humans we're not perfect, but you expect somebody to be functioning pretty close to that level because lives are in their hands.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that's so appalling about this. Lives were are in the hands of police officers almost more than anybody else. And if they are not calm, consistent, controlled people, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
And
How do you mix up your taser and your gun? I mean, in my mind, I'm not a police officer, but I imagine you go through some sort of training where you choose which side, you keep which weapon on, and you don't change that side.
and you know what, darling, this is a conversation, a big conversation. And unfortunately, we don't have time to take it into the depths that it really needs to go. Maybe we talk a little bit more about this next week. But it's a very important conversation. It's very upsetting. And certainly our hearts go out to the family of this young man and to all the families who have been hurt in circumstances similar to this.
Yeah.
So the conversation goes on. And in the meantime, thank you all for listening. Oops, my timer went off. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for thank you for joining us. And please talk with your friends about these issues. Talk with others. Let's raise awareness. Let's get things changed. This just can't keep going on. You know that you can hear this show, Change It Up Radio, on AM 1170, The Answer, on Sunday evenings at 9 o'clock, also on FM 96.1. We are on every major podcast platform, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And thank you for being with us today. And thank you, Erin, for joining me and for bringing up this most important discussion. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.